The first time I saw our wedding photo in someone else's living room, my spouse nearly drove through a red light trying to stop me from looking at it. At the time, I didn't understand why. 3 hours later, I was standing in the rain outside a house I'd never seen before, staring through a window at a family that supposedly didn't exist. And sitting on their fireplace mantel was a framed photograph from my wedding. A wedding none of those people had attended. My name is Ethan Parker. And until that moment, I thought I knew everything about the person I married. I was wrong. Very wrong. The strange thing is, the warning signs had always been there. I just kept ignoring them. I met my spouse, Riley, 6 years earlier at a bookstore in Seattle. I was standing on a ladder trying to reach a novel on the top shelf when the entire stack shifted. A dozen books came crashing down. One landed directly on Riley's foot. Instead of getting angry, Riley laughed. That's one way to start a conversation. I still remember that smile. Warm. Easy. The kind that made strangers feel like old friends. 3 years later we got married. And for most of our marriage, life felt almost perfect. Almost. There was only one thing that never made sense. I had never met Riley's family. Not once. At first it didn't seem unusual. Some families lived far away. Some were complicated. Some simply weren't close. Whenever I asked about them, Riley always had an explanation. They live in another state. We don't really talk. It's a long story. One explanation became another. Then another. Years passed. The subject never changed. Whenever family came up, Riley became uncomfortable. Not angry. Not defensive. Just sad. And somehow that sadness always stopped me from pushing further. One evening, about 4 years into our marriage, I finally asked directly. Do they know we got married? Riley looked up from the kitchen counter. The smile disappeared instantly. Yes. Then why haven't I met them? A long silence followed. Too long. Finally Riley whispered. It's complicated. I laughed softly. You've been saying that for years. I know. Are they angry at you? No. Then what's the problem? Riley looked away. I just don't want to talk about it. That answer should have bothered me more. Instead, I let it go. Because when you love someone, you sometimes mistake trust for blindness. The next few months felt normal. Until the phone calls started. They always happened late at night. Always. I'd wake up around midnight and find Riley sitting on the back porch whispering into a phone. The moment I stepped outside, the conversation ended. Every time. One night I decided to ask. Who keeps calling? Riley froze. Nobody. I raised an eyebrow. Nobody calls for 40 minutes. It's work. At midnight? It's complicated. There were those words again. Complicated. The answer that explained nothing. The following week I noticed something else. Money. A lot of money. Riley had always handled most of our finances. Not because I wasn't involved. It was simply easier. One afternoon I was paying bills when I noticed several large withdrawals. $5,000. Then $8,000. Then $12,000. My stomach tightened. We weren't rich. Those amounts mattered. A lot. That evening I brought it up. Did we buy something? Riley nearly dropped a plate. What? The withdrawals. Oh. That single word came too quickly. I can explain. Great. But the explanation never came. Instead Riley kissed my forehead and changed the subject. The next morning I checked our account again. The transaction descriptions were gone. Deleted. My heart skipped. People don't hide things for innocent reasons. At least that's what I told myself. A month later, my best friend Marcus came over to watch football. Marcus had known me since college. He was the kind of friend who noticed things other people missed. Halfway through the game he glanced toward the kitchen. "Something's off." "What do you mean?" He lowered his voice. "Your spouse seems nervous." I laughed. "About what?" "No idea." Marcus shrugged. "But every time family comes up, Riley looks like someone pulled a fire alarm." I wanted to dismiss it. But I couldn't. Because I'd noticed the same thing. For the first time, doubt started growing inside me. Small. Quiet. Dangerous. Then came the package. The package changed everything. I arrived home early one Friday afternoon. A delivery driver was walking away from our porch. A large envelope sat by the door. Riley wasn't home. I picked it up. The return address belonged to a real estate company. My chest tightened. Real estate? I opened it. Inside were property documents. House purchase records. Mortgage information. Inspection reports. My hand started shaking. The buyer's name was Riley Parker. My spouse. The property address was unfamiliar. The purchase price was nearly $300,000. I stared at the pages. Over. And over. And over. Riley had bought a house. Without telling me. My first thought wasn't confusion. It was betrayal. What married person secretly buys a house? My mind immediately went somewhere darker. Someone else. Another life. Another relationship. A place I wasn't supposed to know existed. By the time Riley got home, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the documents spread out in front of me. The color drained from Riley's face instantly. "Ethan. What is this?" Silence. Heavy silence. The kind that answers questions before words ever do. "What house?" Still nothing. I stood up. "Whose house is it?" Riley's eyes filled with panic. "Please." "Please what?" "Not tonight." I laughed in disbelief. "Not tonight?" "Ethan, I can explain." "Then explain." Instead, Riley whispered the words I was beginning to hate. "It's complicated." Something inside me snapped. For the first time in our marriage. I walked out of the room before saying something I'd regret. But that wasn't the worst part. Not even close. Because 3 days later, I followed Riley. And what I found at that house destroyed every explanation I still believed. I watched my spouse park in front of the secret property. Then walk inside. A few minutes later, the front curtains opened. And standing beside Riley was an older woman. A younger man. 2 children. And hanging above the fireplace was a framed photograph from our wedding. The same wedding Riley claimed no family had attended. My blood ran cold. Because at that moment, only one thought made sense. My spouse hadn't been hiding from their family. My spouse had been hiding a second family from me. And as I stared through that window, the front door suddenly opened. Someone inside had seen me. And they were walking straight toward me. The front door swung open so suddenly that I nearly stepped backward off the porch. An older woman stood there. She looked to be in her late 60s. Silver hair. Kind eyes. A face that somehow carried both strength and sadness. But what stopped me wasn't her appearance. It was the tears that immediately filled her eyes when she saw me. "Oh my God," she whispered. My stomach dropped. She knew who I was. Before I could speak, Riley rushed outside. "Ethan." The panic in my spouse's voice was unmistakable. The older woman looked between us. Then she covered her mouth with both hands. For several seconds nobody spoke. Finally I broke the silence. "Who are these people?" Riley looked exhausted. Like someone who had spent years carrying a secret too heavy to hold anymore. Please come inside. No. My voice came out sharper than intended. No more secrets. The younger man stepped forward. He looked about 30. Dark hair. Broad shoulders. And strangely familiar eyes. Eyes I'd seen somewhere before. I just couldn't place them. Maybe we should talk, he said gently. I laughed bitterly. Talk? I pointed toward the wedding photo above the fireplace. My spouse told me for 6 years that none of you were involved in our lives. The room went silent. I turned toward Riley. Now I find our wedding picture hanging in a house I didn't even know existed. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Finally Riley whispered. I never wanted you to find out like this. Find out what? That sentence echoed in my head. Find out what? The older woman began crying. Actual tears. Not guilt. Not fear. Heartbreak. And somehow that confused me even more. If these people were part of some secret double life, why did they look devastated instead of caught? I turned toward Riley. Start talking. My spouse closed their eyes. For a moment I thought the truth was finally coming. Instead Riley said something that made me angrier. Not here. I stared in disbelief. You're kidding. Ethan, please. No. I pointed toward the family. Who are they? The younger man looked at Riley. Riley looked away. Nobody answered. That silence felt louder than any confession. I walked out. This time nobody stopped me. Not Riley. Not the crying woman. Nobody. By the time I reached my car, I was shaking. The drive home felt endless. My mind raced through every possibility. An ex-wife. Hidden children. A second marriage. A double life. Every theory sounded insane. Yet somehow less insane than the truth I eventually learned. That night Riley didn't come home. Neither did the next night. The silence inside our house felt unbearable. I barely slept. Barely ate. Every memory from our marriage suddenly felt suspicious. Every happy moment came with questions. Every explanation felt like a lie. 3 days later my sister Olivia arrived. She took one look at me and knew something was wrong. Ethan. I tried smiling. Failed. She sat beside me. What happened? For 2 hours I told her everything. The secret calls. The money. The house. The family. The wedding photo. When I finished, Olivia looked stunned. That's bad. That's one word for it. You think Riley has another family? I laughed bitterly. What else am I supposed to think? Olivia didn't answer. Because honestly? The evidence looked terrible. Then my phone rang. Riley. For the first time in days. I almost ignored it. Almost. Instead I answered. What? Silence. Then Riley's shaky voice. Can we meet? I stared out the window. Why? Because I've spent 6 years trying to protect everyone. Everyone except me. That hurt landed. I could hear it. Ethan. No. Please. No more secrets. A long silence followed. Then Riley whispered. Tomorrow. Tomorrow what? You'll finally know everything. The call ended. I didn't sleep that night either. The next morning Riley texted me an address. Not the secret house. A hospital. My heart sank. A hospital? Nothing about this made sense anymore. When I arrived, Riley was waiting near the entrance. For the first time since I'd met my spouse, I saw fear. Real fear. Not panic. Not anxiety. Fear. We walked through silent hallways together. Neither of us spoke. Finally, Riley stopped outside a room. Room 412. The door was slightly open. I looked inside. The older woman from the house sat beside a hospital bed. The younger man stood near the window. Neither noticed me. The patient lying in the bed looked incredibly frail. Thin. Weak. Oxygen tubes. Gray skin. An elderly man nearing the end of his life. I turned toward Riley. "What is this?" My spouse's eyes filled with tears. "He asked to see you." The words hit me like a punch. "What?" "He asked to see you." Nothing made sense. I had never seen this man before. Why would he ask for me? The older woman looked up. She saw us standing in the doorway. Immediately she began crying again. The younger man lowered his head, as though he already knew what was coming. Riley gently guided me inside. The elderly man's eyes slowly opened. For several seconds he simply stared at me. Then something extraordinary happened. A smile appeared. Small. Weak. But unmistakably joyful. His hand trembled as he reached toward me. I stood frozen. The room felt suddenly too small. Too quiet. Too heavy. Then the old man whispered 2 words. Words that completely shattered my world. "Hello, son." I couldn't breathe. I literally couldn't breathe. Every sound disappeared. Every thought stopped. The room spun around me. Son? No. Impossible. My father died when I was 8 years old. That's what I'd been told my entire life. That's what my mother told me. That's what everyone believed. The old man's eyes overflowed with tears. "I've waited 34 years to meet you." My knees nearly gave out. I looked at Riley. Then the older woman. Then the younger man. Nobody looked surprised. Except me. And in that moment, I realized something far more terrifying than betrayal. Everyone in this room knew a truth about my life that I didn't. And the answer was about to destroy everything I thought I knew about my family. I stared at the man lying in the hospital bed. My mind refused to process what I'd just heard. "Hello, son." The words echoed through my head again and again. Impossible. My father was dead. At least that's what I'd believed for 34 years. I turned toward Riley. "Tell me this is some kind of mistake." Tears rolled down my spouse's cheeks. "I wish it were." The room suddenly felt too small. Too hot. Too suffocating. I backed away from the bed. "No." The elderly man's voice trembled. "Ethan." "No." My hands shook violently. "My father died." The older woman quietly lowered her head. The younger man stared at the floor. Nobody argued. Nobody interrupted. And somehow that silence terrified me even more. The old man swallowed hard. "No." His eyes filled with tears. I didn't. I couldn't breathe. The anger came first. Hot. Instant. Overwhelming. 34 years of confusion suddenly exploded inside me. "What do you mean you didn't?" His shoulders shook. "Your mother took you away." The room froze. For several seconds nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then I laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because the alternative was too painful. My mother would never do that. The old man closed his eyes. The look on his face was heartbreaking. "I know that's what you want to believe." I turned toward Riley. "What is this?" Riley wiped away tears. "The house." "The house?" The house was for him. I stared. "What?" The older woman finally spoke. "His name is Thomas." She gently touched the old man's shoulder. "My husband. Thomas." The man who supposedly died decades ago. The man who was supposedly my father. I couldn't process any of it. The younger man finally stepped forward. My name is Caleb. His voice cracked. I'm your brother. I felt the floor disappear beneath me. Brother? My eyes shot toward him. The familiar eyes. The familiar smile. The strange resemblance I'd noticed before. Suddenly I saw it. We shared the same eyes. The same jawline. The same crooked smile. The realization hit like a freight train. This wasn't a scam. This wasn't some misunderstanding. This was real. I slowly sank into a chair. Nobody spoke. Nobody rushed me. The silence lasted nearly a minute. Then Thomas began telling his story. 34 years earlier he and my mother had divorced. The separation had been ugly. Painful. Messy. But according to him, it had never been abusive. Never violent. Never dangerous. Just two young people who couldn't make their marriage work. The court allowed shared custody. For a while everything was normal. Then one day my mother disappeared. She moved to another state. Changed her phone number. Changed her address. And took me with her. Thomas spent years searching. Years. Private investigators. Lawyers. Court filings. Every lead ended in failure. Eventually he was told something devastating. My mother had informed people that he had died. And because I was so young, I believed it. I sat there speechless. Every childhood memory suddenly felt uncertain. Every story I'd been told became questionable. Why didn't you keep searching? The question came out harsher than intended. Thomas looked away. I did. His voice broke. For 11 years. The room fell silent. I never stopped. Tears filled his eyes. I missed your birthdays. His voice cracked. I missed your graduation. Another tear. I missed every important moment of your life. The pain in his face wasn't acting. It wasn't manipulation. It was grief. Real grief. The kind carried for decades. I looked toward Riley. How did you find him? Riley lowered their head. It was an accident. 3 years earlier, while researching family history online for a genealogy project, Riley had discovered records that didn't match the story I'd always been told. One search led to another. Eventually Riley found Thomas. Alive. Living only 2 hours away. I stared. You knew? The guilt on Riley's face answered before words did. For 3 years. My chest tightened. 3 years. 3 entire years. Why didn't you tell me? Riley began crying. Because he asked me not to. I looked at Thomas. What? His hands trembled. I was scared. The honesty in his voice stunned me. Scared? I'd already lost you once. A tear slid down his cheek. I couldn't survive losing you twice. The room went silent again. Then Riley explained everything. The late-night calls. The secret meetings. The hidden house. The money. Every piece of evidence I'd interpreted as betrayal. The house had never been for a lover. Thomas had recently been diagnosed with terminal heart failure. His medical bills had drained everything. He was losing the family home. Riley secretly bought the property to keep him from becoming homeless during his final months. The withdrawals. The phone calls. The meetings. The secrecy. All of it had been an attempt to preserve a dying father's dignity until he felt ready to meet the son he'd lost. I felt sick. Not because of what they'd done. Because of what I'd believed. Every accusation. Every suspicion. Every angry thought. I remembered standing outside that house convinced my spouse was living a double life. Instead, Riley had been protecting a broken old man whose greatest wish was simply to see his son one last time. I buried my face in my hands. For the first time in years, I cried. Not quietly. Not politely. I sobbed. Decades of confusion poured out of me. Thomas cried too. The room became filled with the sound of people mourning lost time. Hours later, everyone else quietly stepped outside, leaving just me and him. Father and son. Alone. For the first time. I don't know what to call you. The words escaped before I could stop them. Thomas smiled sadly. You can call me Thomas. I nodded. He looked relieved. Then he whispered something I'll never forget. I don't need you to forgive the past. I looked at him. I just wanted one chance to love you before I leave. That sentence shattered whatever remained of my anger. Nobody gets 34 years back. Nobody. Not him. Not me. Not anyone. But in that moment I realized something important. We still had today. And sometimes today is all life gives us. Over the next 6 months, I spent every possible moment with Thomas. We went fishing. Talked about baseball. Shared old photographs. Learned each other's favorite foods. Told stories. Laughed. Cried. Made up for decades in whatever time we had left. I got to know Caleb too. The brother I never knew existed. The older woman, Margaret, became family as well. Not replacement family. Family. Something that had always been missing finally felt complete. One autumn evening Thomas sat beside me on the porch of the house Riley had secretly purchased. The sunset painted the sky orange and gold. He looked tired. Very tired. But peaceful. You married a remarkable person. I smiled. I know. Thomas nodded slowly. You almost lost them. The truth hurt. Because it was true. I had spent months believing Riley was betraying me, when in reality my spouse had been carrying one of the most difficult secrets imaginable. Not out of dishonesty. Out of compassion. 2 weeks later Thomas passed away peacefully in his sleep. The grief was immense. But so was the gratitude. Because unlike many families, we got our goodbye. We got our chance. At the funeral, Caleb stood beside me. Margaret held my hand. And Riley never left my side. As I looked around, I realized something extraordinary. The family I thought my spouse was hiding from me had actually been the family trying desperately to find me. Years later, a photograph still hangs above our fireplace. Not our wedding picture. A newer one. In it, Thomas stands between Riley and me. All three of us are smiling. Whenever people ask about the photo, I tell them something I learned the hard way. Secrets can break families. But sometimes the people carrying them aren't protecting themselves, they're protecting someone else's heart. And every time I say those words, I look at Riley. The person I almost stopped trusting. The person who gave me back a father. And I remember that what looked like betrayal was actually the greatest act of love anyone had ever shown me.